Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey, and today is going to be some life advice, hopefully some comedy. We always like to have a few laughs here and there, but and we got a beautiful smile on camera, so hopefully we'll have some laughs. But
Thank you.
yeah, I'm here with Ms. Shirley Buck for some life advice. She has her book, but not only her book, her story, her life and she's going to share with us a little bit of that, if you want the full story that's in her book, and we're going to have that in the links in the description below, but she's going to give us a little bit about it to connect with y'all. So, most of my listeners are military and first responders, and it's funny, people think the military traumatizes you, and that's true. But most military members come in already messed up. Most of the people I served with, I mean, the family drama and a lot of them, and not all of them, of course, you got your patriotic, hardy American heroes and stuff, but there's a lot of them who ran away from home. They had parents they wanted to escape, or because of the family drama and the childhood trauma, they just weren't prepared for life, and they fell back on it. And then you have people, of course, I had people who join for other reasons. Like I had a buddy, he's like, I joined so the Navy would pay for me to have a strip club. They're gonna be my funding. So you have American heroes, you have,
Right.
traumatized kids, high schoolers, and then you have etc. I had a guy who wanted to open a restaurant where he just had weed in all the food. He wanted to make like this edible restaurant. And then him and the strip club guy were gonna work together to make it a dual business venture. But yeah, Miss
Interesting
Shirley,
combo.
glad to have you here. And it's kind
Thank
of
you for
fitting,
having me.
yeah, Shirley Temple is red, and you got the red leaf and the ginger hair, so it's all kind of ties together. But with that said, red
Yeah.
leaf, you got your book, so tell us a little bit about that, as well as whatever parts of your story you want to share.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me and thank you, the listeners, the military and the first responders for all that you do. Um, it's interesting that you said, some people join the military because they're
Mm.
getting away from trauma. And I never really thought about that, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Once you said that, something clicked, and I was like, yeah, that does make sense. I was born to deaf parents, and that in itself, puts a lot of responsibility on a kid. Yeah, I interpreted their divorce at 5 years old, and a bit about my background. My mother had committed suicide when I was 13, and she had become a abusive alcoholic when I was 8, and it kind of led to, just her not being able to cope anymore.
Right.
And then she tried to take my life as well, and I survived, obviously. And I moved in with my dad, who was remarried to someone else. She didn't want me to eat there or wash my clothes there. So, needless to say,
Huh.
I ended up on the streets with the wrong crowd. I took a
Yeah.
job from a man that molested me for 2 years, trusted a man that said he loved me and wanted to take me away from all of it. And, was pregnant at 15. Went through a lot. I mean, that's like the shortened version, years of severe trauma and abuse. My book will tell you the whole story, but it led to drug addictions, eating disorders, depression, anxiety, a lot of things that I was pretty much turning to drugs and alcohol for
Right.
an escape, and I was partying with my friends. So it was like, oh, it's cool, it's fun. And I was kind of ignoring all the things that, were really happening beneath the surface.
Yeah.
So when I was about 23, I was engaged to a great guy, and I felt safe for the first time. Like it was a responsible guy, a good guy, someone I could trust. And um, I broke down. I had a complete nervous breakdown. I
Mm.
thought I was going to be institutionalized. I did not think I would make it. I didn't think I would live. I didn't even think I would want to live. Like it was the scariest thing in my life. And I think once I was safe, I felt safe, like everything
Okay.
came to the surface and
Right.
reared its head at me. And I don't know. I just broke down. I stopped going to work. I wouldn't leave the house. I just had a really, really bad experience. Um, to be honest with you, he ended up my husband, so my ex-husband, he went and got my niece and my nephew, and he knew that if they were there, I would pull myself together long enough to to be present for them. So
Right.
he was like, let's go to a White Sox game. And I'm a Cubs fan, by the way, but I said, yeah, okay, we'll go. And I had like my own personal talk with God, because I was like, well, if you're
Okay.
there, I need to see a rainbow. It's a sunny day. There was no rain. I was like, I need to see a
Yeah.
rainbow, because I can't go on anymore. I cannot go on anymore. So we went to the game. Little sprinkles started out of nowhere. There was this huge full-blown rainbow over the stadium.
Amen.
And yeah, and it was mind blowing. Even the announcers were like, check out this rainbow. Like, it was on the TV, it was just like this big rainbow. And I looked at my ex-husband, who's Stan in the book, and his name really isn't Stan. I had to change names, but
Yeah,
I
understood.
looked at him and I said, that's my rainbow. That rainbow is for me. And he's like, what are you talking about? So I explained it, but I knew then that I had a purpose and I had to do something. And I was not going to do traditional therapy or meds. Not that it's wrong for everybody. It wasn't right for me, because I felt like I didn't want to go talk to someone who I felt was like super educated, probably never even experienced close to what I've
Right.
experienced. And I didn't
Right.
want to do that. And later on, I kind of, after talking to a lot of people who did go through therapy, they tend to focus on the problem, and the whys, the hows, the what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they focus on the problem so much, and then they give you meds to feel better. And like I said, I'm not knocking it for
Yeah.
everybody. I'm just
You
saying it
want to
wasn't my
focus on the
road.
recovery part. You felt like they focused too much on the issue, not here's what we're gonna do.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so I just started delving into self-help books. And the first one I started with, I can't even remember the author, but it was the Feel Good Handbook. And I really should look up the author, because I always tell everybody I don't know who the author is. But
Yeah.
he's like this clean cut looking guy with this huge smile. And I don't know, I just picked up the book and it started teaching me about mental illness, and what we would see as irrational fears people had. Like, people won't
Right.
leave the house because they think they're going to be framed for murder and go to prison forever. People will drive 2 blocks, 3 blocks, and keep checking the grill of their car because they're afraid they hit someone. There's a lot of different fears out there that maybe
Mm.
some of us are not aware of. And I started realizing, like, oh, this is like, a lot of people are struggling. A lot of people are going through
Yeah.
something. And I mean, I didn't want to leave the house and stuff, but I wasn't fear. It was just that it was fear, but not those kind of fears. It was
Yeah.
fear that I was going to go crazy. And there was a line in the book
Mm.
that said, here, just go ahead and try to go crazy right now at this moment and see if it works. That was kind of like a aha moment. Like, wait a minute. Okay, maybe I'm not going to go crazy. So
Right.
anyway, it just led to me studying. I now about 30 years of studying mindset and mindset transformation, and how changing your mindset literally changes your life. And I can give you a lot of examples, but and it led to like manifestations and the laws of attraction, which doesn't eliminate God. It God is still source, and still who, connected to your inner being.
Amen.
It just kind of takes the organized religion out of it, the fear, the guilt, the you're unworthy and you're lucky that
Mm.
God is even considering you. So yeah, so that was something that helped me heal, overcome, create a life that is successful. And have a loving family. And even my ex-husband, who I talked about, even though we divorced when my kids were 2 and 4, we're still great friends. We went on a family vacation with our adult kids together just last month. And so it's it's all by changing my mindset. And faith has a part, because if you don't believe something, it's not going to happen. That's even stated in the
Right.
Bible. Like, you have to ask believing. So so that's what I do now. I teach people how. I have a 90-day course that teaches people how to transform their mindset, instead of focusing on the issue. Although, my coaching sessions once a week, if they want to talk about the issues, I do, but I kind of steer them away and talk about, maybe the strengths they got from it, or, the lessons. There's a lot of things and what things we can take ownership for, because there's a lot of things that we are still allowing to happen, even when they're not
Mm.
happening to us, or we're letting
Yeah.
people treat us a certain way. And we're saying they're jerks because they do this, they do that, they treat me like
Yeah.
this. Well, no one can treat you anyway when you're an adult, not a child. When you're
Yeah.
an adult, any way that you don't want to be treated. So taking
I get what you're
ownership
saying.
is super important. So that's basically my like quick version of my story,
Right.
what I do.
Yeah, and there's a lot to touch upon here. What I think is interesting is this always happens to me where like if I read a Bible quote or someone brings it up to me throughout that week, other people happen to say that same quote to me and reinforce it. So last night I was with Johnny T. He runs the Refuge Freedom Stories podcast. And by the time this episode comes out, my episode with him will have been out. And his podcast is about real lives changed by the power of God. And at Bible study
Okay.
last night, he said we focused on this quote, which you almost said it, verbatim. You said without belief, blah blah. There's a quote that said, without faith, it is impossible to please God, and you have to believe in something. And
Right.
it's interesting because I've talked with other guests, both religious and non-religious, who said, if what happens when you don't believe in anything? When you just believe in yourself, you're just living to live, But I just think it's interesting that you reinforced that quote there. But you
Yeah.
know, w-
That's
were you?
alignment. That's what alignment is.
Yeah, yeah. It's everything always
We're,
lines
we're
up. Right.
we're
Yeah.
on that same path and same mindset, so it aligns.
Amen. And I have to ask, were you, because you reached out to God, was that just out of desperation because of your situation, or were you religious at all growing up or before then?
Well, my father would take me to church. My father wasn't an abusive bad man. He just wasn't father. I took care of him. He didn't
Yeah.
take care of me. And when he was remarried, he was happy to have me out of the house. Like, I left for a summer, he never came and looked for me. So, but he
Wow.
wasn't a bad guy. He would go to church every Sunday,
Okay.
and he was actually a minister for the deaf community. So there was
Oh,
a
wow.
time when I was 10 years, yeah, when I was 10 years old, he was driving me back home to my mom's house. And he said, "Do you know that if we got in an accident today and you died, you'd go to hell?" And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, because you're not baptized. So you're gonna go to hell if we die. So next Sunday, I'm gonna take you to church and you're gonna get baptized." Okay, so
He could have just said that
when
last
it,
part. He could have
yeah,
just said, I'm going to get you
he
baptized
could
next
have,
Sunday.
yeah,
He
he
didn't
could
have to
have,
put the fear of God in you to do it. I
yeah,
mean, it's not like you were going to say,
yeah,
no, I don't want to do this.
right, right. But that whole week, I thought about that. And I thought about,
Hmm.
would God really do that to me? Then I started to think, if he would, that doesn't really seem like God to me. That doesn't seem like the loving God that I think
Yeah.
that I talk to, that when I'm terrified because my mother's gone for days or hitting me or whatever, I can't see him saying, creating me to go through all this trauma to say, well, you weren't baptized. There you go,
Yeah.
in the flames for eternity. Like, what? That just really, it really made me think. So, and the minister was like, "Do you believe Jesus Christ is your savior?" And I said, "Yeah, but I don't know that I believe that if I wasn't baptized, I would go to hell." And here we're talking in front of the whole congregation, and he's like, well, yes, it says in the Bible that if you're not, and I said, well, I think that's kind of a metaphor. I think that like maybe it just means that we have to renew our lives, like, become new in God. But I don't think that, like, I think the water is maybe a symbol of that, but I
Um,
don't think that God, and so I started this whole, and he did not want to have this conversation in front of the congregation, especially with a 10-year-old. So he was like,
right.
well, let's just do the baptism and we'll talk about this later. He was
Mm,
really disturbed about it. And I didn't know how to take that. So I mean, I guess I went through life kind of questioning religion. And I did take it
right.
upon myself to read the Bible myself because I was just like, I don't know what's going on. But I know that I don't think I remember Jesus talking about hell. I think he talked more about forgiveness and love and
Okay.
having meals with prostitutes and the sinners. And he didn't come down to hang out with all the high priests. He came down, for the people who needed him. um
Amen.
so I mean, I think I struggle with organized religion, but I know that I have a clear connection and closeness to God. So if I don't know if that is, makes
Yes,
sense to you,
yes, ma'am,
but
it does. Because it's actually something we've talked about on the show a lot, because I said, look, and this was my message to all, non-believers or people who had left religion because of the community. I said, and all stemmed from Ricky D. Sluter when he came on, that episode where he talked about the three miracles performed on his daughter. You know, he said it's often the case that we reflect who our parents are onto who God is, and so I was thinking
yeah,
about how people often judge God based on, you know, like for example, we use Christianity and people will meet Christians in their lives who aren't good people, who aren't perfect people. And then they'll be like, oh, well, if that's God's community, this and that. Or a lot of people have issues with the churches. And so what I promote a lot on this podcast is I always tell everyone, you cannot be a non-believer or leave religion if you've never read the Bible yourself. I said, you
yeah,
cannot hate on God without having never read the Bible. I said, that's the only way to know who God is to read it yourself, understand it yourself, and he will help you understand it by yourself. He did not give us the Bible and say, only the priest can interpret this for you. He
right,
gave us the
right.
ability to read, and he will fill you with the Holy Spirit. And so I'm so glad that you went out there and did that on your own. And I'm glad it wasn't one of those baptisms where he held you under a little extra longer. He's like, we got to get the devil out of her,
Shut up.
you're already on
Exactly.
dangerous area with the ginger hair,
Yeah,
They're like
yeah.
witch in the church,
I know, exactly,
it was
exactly.
dangerous. But
That's true.
the reason I brought this up in the first place is if you when you asked God for a rainbow, did you know that was a sign of his covenant
With
when
Noah?
yeah, with Noah, when Noah's
Yeah,
Ark was made,
I did, but I don't know that I mean, I didn't
consciously. I was
correlate it
wondering if
with.
it was like a conscious thing or like a unconscious thing, because that like
No,
was
I,
really
I
intriguing to
knew I
me.
knew that because, like I said, I was like, my dad, even when I was really little, drove the bus for the Hammond Baptist Church. Like, he was always involved with the church. My mother was Catholic and my father was just completely against that. But so I did know
Okay.
a lot about, the stories of the Bible,
Yeah.
especially when you're in Sunday school as a kid.
Oh yeah, the big
But
ones.
I don't think that's why I asked. I think I asked for it because it was a
Just
beautiful
a
sunny
miracle.
day and I
Yeah.
knew there was going to be no rainbow. Like, I was like, if he
Okay.
really shows me a rainbow, then I know for sure. And I was expecting maybe seeing a picture of a rainbow, or you know what I mean, or
Yeah.
a commercial with a rainbow. Like, I didn't expect an actual rainbow. And I'm talking from one end to the other, the most magnificent
Yeah.
rainbow. And I was like, wow, okay. Well, I guess he's got some plans for me because I didn't die when I was 13, and
Right.
now he's showing me rainbows, so there must be a reason I'm supposed to be here. So here I
Okay.
am
Yeah.
talking to you.
Right. Now, one thing that interested me, and I don't mean this disrespectfully at all to anyone, but it's like you had a deaf on deaf relationship with both of your parents were deaf, correct? Both of them.
Yes,
And so
yes.
I'm like, why? My question is just why would they do that? And I don't mean in a disrespectful way. It's just like And I was thinking about it, I was like, I guess it makes sense because they have that in common, I assume,
Right.
but it's like
Well,
now now no one can hear anything, and then you as a kid having to take up that role, and bearing all of that. I'm just interested in, do you know how your parents met? And I'm just curious how two deaf people came to
yeah,
know
they
each
they
other like
met at a
that.
beach, which I don't know if it was like, because I know that there are deaf communities that hang
Right,
out together,
right.
and my dad went to a school for the deaf in Jacksonville, Illinois. My mother just went to a regular high school and she was just pushed through. My dad had to
Yeah.
teach her how to sign, he had to teach her how to drive. And, my grandparents would hide her in the bedroom when people came over because they were embarrassed. So she already had super
Oh,
low self-esteem
yeah.
and but they met at a beach, that I know. But so I don't know if it was like a deaf outing or anything like that, but I know they met at a beach. And I think deaf people tend to marry other deaf people because they really, they get each other, they can communicate with each
Right.
other easily. There is a whole group, CODA, which helps adults that grew up with deaf parents,
Okay.
hearing adults that grew up with. I've never went to a meeting, but I know that that's what it's about. And I guess there's a movie out called CODA as well, which I really want to see. I haven't
Hmm.
seen yet. But I think people are starting to be aware of uh, how children grow up with deaf parents because they do. I guess that anyone with different language barriers, maybe, but you
Right.
have to be their voice and their ears. Like you got to make all their phone calls. Like I said, I interpreted their divorce at 5 years old. Friends would come over and be like, "Where's your toys? Like, where's your Barbies?" And Barbies, toys. Like I had a stereo and I danced. That's what I did. I didn't have toys. They didn't even buy toys. Like they didn't, I wasn't a kid to them. I was someone who, I mean, I wrote out my mother's rent checks when the Social Security check would come in. The
Wow.
welfare, the food stamps would come in. I mean, she'd try to take them and sell them for alcohol and stuff, but I ran the household. So when she did commit suicide, I carried guilt for a long time. Like I failed. I was supposed to take
Mm.
care of her, and I failed. So that was hard to get over as well. Um, my dad, the only time he would ever come looking for me is if he had a stack of mail he needed me to read and explain to him. So he would, find me, even as an adult, he would come over with stacks of mail, like to my house and, tell me what this was about. And, um,
Were they born deaf? Like they couldn't talk, they
my
couldn't.
mother was born deaf. My dad became deaf at 2 years old with spinal meningitis.
Okay.
So I do have a brother that was given up for adoption, a half brother, when I was 9, and he's deaf. So he found me after my dad had passed. Unfortunately, he never got to meet my dad, but he is the spitting image of him and talks like my dad rode a Harley. He
Well,
rides, he has 3 Harleys. It's just it's insane how much he's like my dad for never meeting him. But I don't know how that would have been growing. He was adopted by hearing people, so I don't. And he said that was difficult, but I don't know
right.
how that dynamic would have went with deaf parents and a deaf child. I'm not. I often wonder, like, wow, what would that have
Like
been like?
like the movie The Silent Place. I haven't seen that yet, but I know
I
they can't
haven't.
talk, so they just make hand symbols the whole time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a movie where aliens invade Earth and the aliens
Oh,
kill whatever makes noise. So the family that the movie follows this family that they're completely silent. They learn how to sign and like they can't make any noise. They're actually
wow.
dropping the prequel, I believe this year, like the day they first arrived. I never watched
Wow,
it.
that
My
sounds
mom and sisters
interesting.
watched it. It's definitely interesting because it forced everyone to be completely silent
Silent.
and live a new
Wow,
lifestyle.
that
Yeah,
does sound
it's crazy.
interesting. I'd like to see that.
But I was trying to understand it if they were born deaf because you said you had to read for him. Could they not? They weren't able to learn how
No,
to read, I guess.
yeah,
Or
my dad could read somewhat. It was like he had like a
okay.
fourth grade education, is what he would say,
Mm,
you know.
okay.
So there was a time when I was in like eighth grade that I would, there was some nights I would be home and it would make my stepmother nuts. She'd go lock herself in the bedroom or whatever. But I would sit down and teach him, like he would come, he'd have words that he'd have underlined in the Bible because he wanted to read the Bible, and he'd say, well, what, and he have a deaf version, a Bible for deaf, where it's a lot easier to understand.
Okay.
So he would say, well, what does this word mean? And I would tell him in sign language, and then he would, try to remember what that means. So I was working with him to teach him how to do that. They could read very little, like they didn't really
Okay.
comprehend, and that's why I had to read the mail for
Right.
them and explain what it meant, and um, write out the checks and things like that. It was
Okay.
yeah, and I think my mother would have been able to write out checks and stuff. It's just that she was always out of it.
Right.
That's
So
where I came in.
you learn sign language before you learn English even then, if I'm understanding
Yeah.
correctly, huh?
Yeah. I
Wow.
mean, my grandparents could hear and stuff, so I guess but my grandmother said
Right.
that like I would come in and sign to them all the time. And my grandfather had some kind of trach thing, I don't know, and I would just go in and sign to him. And she's like, he can hear you. So I guess, yeah, I learned
Huh.
sign language before I learned to speak.
It's interesting. I'm just thinking about how like and Ricky D. Sluder and I talked about this, like how when you grow up, I mean, especially if you're not exposed to a lot of other families, you think this is normal. Like his dad would get angry and smash stuff around the house or furniture apart. He thought everyone's dad did that. He thought it was
Yeah,
normal. And I was thinking about how there was kids during the pandemic who thought like, oh, we always wear masks because they were
right,
young and they grew up. It was only 3 years about, but they thought that was
right.
normal. They thought this was the standard or that going to school online was normal. I'm just thinking if you were raised in a deaf family and you learn sign and then I wonder like how long if you were raised with them and then you went out into the real world, how like hearing for the well, you would hear n- you would just think humans couldn't talk, I guess, so to speak, because you could hear
No,
animals and
I
other
mean
sounds like
there was TV, and there was,
okay,
there, so I knew, I wasn't cut off from TV or
okay,
music or things like that. And, my grandparents and family could, you know, hear. So I don't think it was like that. I think I may have thought chaos was normal in a family, but I don't know that
yeah.
I think I knew my parents were deaf, but not everybody's deaf.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying in general it'd be an interesting study, see like how if
Right.
people were
Yeah.
raised. But anyway, what I was gonna say is so one of the songs I'm dropping this year is about the people left behind after someone commits suicide and especially how they feel on the inside, this guilt they feel, almost like a survivor's guilt kind of thing where it's like, why did
Right.
they take their life? What did I do wrong? I talked to them. I took care of them and this powerlessness. And so this, you don't have to answer this question if you don't want to, but were there
Yeah.
times after your mother's suicide where, because she also attempted to take your life, were there times where you wish that she had, especially when you were drinking and kind of self-medicating all of that trauma you didn't even know you had? Did you ever think, I wish my mom had just taken me with her?
No, I don't think I ever felt that.
Okay.
Not once. No. I think I didn't know if I was going to go on living when I had the nervous breakdown because I was
Right.
terrified, and every single day was sheer terror in my head. That I don't wish on anybody. That was very scary, and I'm so grateful to come out of that.
Right.
And I think that maybe I may have went through that so that I can understand others who are struggling.
Right.
But no, I never felt like I wished she would had taken my life. I was
Okay.
always grateful that she didn't. I don't think I had survivor's guilt as much as I had um guilt that I didn't take care of her properly. Like I
Right.
didn't do a good enough job, and she couldn't handle life because I didn't do a good enough job. Um,
Okay.
but I could understand survivor's guilt, but
Okay.
no, I don't think that
Yeah, I was
that
just curious.
was my situation.
What interests me is that, I mean, you had all this stuff bottled up for a while, and you said it wasn't until, and it seems ironic that you were in a safe space that it all came out.
Yeah,
And it's interesting how you talk about that because because I'll scroll through on Instagram sometimes, and I've had some reels posted by women who were like in a healthy relationship finally. They had been in like toxic relationships before, and how they're just like waiting for this, and they're like, oh, he did this and wasn't expecting something, or I told him no, and nothing bad happened. They're like
yeah,
so used to the bad stuff. What and just like it's almost like some of them have like a breakdown because they're like not used to the safe is the abnormal now. And so
yeah,
but I was thinking
exactly.
of it kind of in a different way, how like you were like, it's almost like subconsciously your brain was like, we are not, when you were drinking and partying and everything, we are not in a good spot to break down because if we
Break
do,
down. Yeah,
something bad would happen. And it wasn't until you were in a safe spot, your body was like, hey, all right, we're safe to have a
yeah.
breakdown. We have someone
I
who's going to
think
take care of us.
that's our inner being, soul, spirit, whatever you call it. I think that all of us have a soul and a spirit from God. And I believe we have guardian angels too. And I think that it's there to kind of protect us because our bodies do a lot of things on its own to protect ourselves, right?
Right.
I forget. I a lot of my memory was wiped out. Like I could remember everything bad my mom did, but I can't remember anything good. I can't. And
Yeah.
I think it's because, and it's not like she was this monster constantly. She was
Yeah.
a very abusive alcoholic, yes. But I remember like my friends that I still know from that I've known since I was 9 years old. They're like, "Oh, you remember when your mom brought you that doll from Wisconsin?" I'm like, "No, I don't remember." Like, you don't remember that? Like there's things that they remember that she did that was nice. My memory is totally wiped out. So that was my brain because I was so young. I had to remember the bad to be okay with her being gone. If I remembered the good, the pain would have
Mm,
been too bad.
that's
So
interesting
I
too.
think that like that's almost a gift from God. Like we have the an inner being that protects us and watches out for us, I believe. And
Okay.
I feel like until I was safe, they kept everything suppressed.
It's interesting. So thank you. You set me up to say one of my favorite quotes, which always makes me happy when I can share one of my favorite quotes. So I remember in like seventh or eighth grade, we read Julius Caesar, the play by Shakespeare, and we had to memorize the whole monologue that I don't remember. Someone gives this monologue at, I believe it's Caesar's death, because they killed him. And
Right.
I don't remember any of that. Except the beginning, fellow countrymen, lend me your ears. There was a quote in there that I've always remembered, and he said about Caesar, you know, the evil a man does lives on after him. The good is oft interred with the bones. And he said how it's a shame that whenever we bury someone, we just remember the bad stuff. And they did so many good things, they're all just thrown into the grave. And we've talked before on my podcast, I've talked with, other people how our mindsets work on momentum. And unfortunately, it's where positivity is an uphill, you're trying to take a train uphill, and negativity is downhill, and it like exponentially grows, where like it's so easy to be a pessimist rather than an optimist. And there are people
Yeah,
out there who have
yeah,
mastered, optimism, and nothing can bother them. My dad's grandmother lived to like 99 or 100 and something. They always asked her, like, what did you do? And she just lived a normal life. She just said she never let anything stress her. She never worried about a thing. She believed everything was always going to be all right, which
yeah,
it's hard to do that. But it's interesting that seeing that you said even about your mother, how you think in some way, especially uh, because of, want to keep yourself safe, how you kind of remembered the bad because that was the best way to grieve. It's interesting. And I know when I co-host this show called Generational Bridge Builders with Stephen Barrow, and he shared a story with me where one of his good friends committed suicide, and Stephen was so frustrated, and he wasn't gonna go to the funeral. He was just like, too angry to even
Yeah.
grieve. And
And,
luckily, his
and,
wife,
and anger
yeah,
is an emotion I think a lot of people feel when someone commits suicide, because it's like, you gave up, you left me,
right,
you know, there was so much good that could have happened, and you deserted everything,
and not just
and
suicide, drug overdoses, alcoholic liver
yeah,
failure, anything where you chose, you know,
exactly.
it's awful. So,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
funny when you did, and that's where my 90-day program focuses on getting you in the habit of thinking positive, because
mm.
now more than ever, I think you turn on the TV, it's all bad news. It's all like,
Oh
the
yeah,
billboards are all about, like, you know, pandemics and crime, and like everything is bad news, bad news. I don't even watch the news. I get an email of
yeah,
world things that are going on, so I'm not completely out of it. But my grandmother used to say, if you don't want it in your living room, don't turn it on your TV, because you're bringing it in your living room. Whether it was a
yeah,
movie about murder or whatever, if you don't want it in your living room, don't bring it in there. Don't turn it on in your TV, right?
right.
So I don't watch the news, because it's just terrible, and it's like everybody's debating, everybody's fighting, everybody's so mad. And you go out in the world and you see so many people that don't even smile, and don't even, they're angry, and most of them are angry about things they can't do anything about. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
wow, it's mind blowing. So what I do is try to change people's, like, simple things that I can tell you examples of is just, when I would go see clients, I was driving, and the city was Chicago was always a clean city. And it was one of the things I always took pride in. Like, I'd go to different cities and they'd be filthy, and our city was
yeah.
always
I've never
clean.
been,
And
but
I
I
was
don't
like,
know if that's
man,
still the case. I don't think that's still the case from what I've
well,
heard.
no, not so much. But so anyway, that's where my point is going. I was After COVID, I was driving down the expressway, getting back into work, seeing clients, all excited. I'm back out here. And driving down the expressway, I'd see garbage everywhere. And I'm like, oh my God, why is there so much garbage?
Right.
And every day that I was driving into the city, I would be pissed off. So I was like, well, here, now I'm someone who pays attention to my scale of emotion. So now I'm
Okay.
feeling okay. I'm not feeling good all the time. I'm not feeling happy. I'm not feeling, so where are my thoughts going? I'm focusing on this garbage. Why am I focusing on this garbage when I can look up at the beautiful skyline and the sky and the trees? And why, it's where you put your perception at, where you put your focus.
Mm.
You focus on garbage, you're going to get more garbage. You're not going to feel good. You focus on beauty, you're going to get more beauty, and you're going to feel better. So, I make my corner of my life beautiful, happy. Even when COVID was going on, my grandson was just born. I think he was about a year old. I took him on bike ride. He never knew the word COVID. We took him on bike rides
Oh
every
yeah.
day. We just kept things, you know, our family would get together and have dinners and play cards. And, um, we stayed positive through it all, knowing everything is going to be okay. And I don't think that was the case with a lot of people, and they were scared, and they were,
Yeah.
angry and just isolated. And, so, and then after that, it almost seems like everything is, we're bombarded with,
Mm.
even I think we're the only country in the world that actually advertise meds on TV and commercials.
Mm.
Like, your doctor's supposed to tell you what you need. It says, go ask your doctor about this pill. What?
Right.
You know, so I just feel like, getting your mindset in a better, in a good place. And then you align with, that's where manifestation and the laws of attraction come in, because once you get, once you learn how to transform your mindset, you will see evidence of your life changing. And then you learn how to master it. And it's
Right.
mostly, it is being aligned. more aligned and your vibration being higher, closer to God, connected
Right.
to your inner being. And it's a wonderful thing. And I'm hoping more people tune into more positivity. I mean, even Norman Vincent Peale wrote a book, The Power of Positive Thinking. And that was just simple, like just think positive. It wasn't even delving deep into
Right.
anything. And I remember my grandmother who lived to be 100, and that was one of her favorite books, so that was,
Amen.
she probably did the same thing, was, always
Yeah.
thinking positive. Um, but yeah, when you start to think bad and you can't think positive and you're angry, then it's dis-ease, right? It causes disease because you're at a dis-ease in your
Huh.
body, in your life,
I
and
like that.
it causes disease. That's, and I do think you live longer if you're happier, if you
Oh yeah.
have a zest
100%.
for life, if and you have gratitude in your life. All those things are important. So mindset's huge, huge for sure. You can work out all the time and get your body looking perfect, but if your mind's not in the right place, you're still messing up. You're still not
Oh yeah.
happy. You're still not, so it has to be a whole mind, body, soul connection in order for you to truly live life and create the life that you desire.
Yeah, and it's definitely an inundation of bad news, but there are accounts out there. So I follow someone on Instagram, and I'm sure even the regular television has it, that they only cover good news, only positive stories. And I like to see more of those, mixed in with the broad stream media for news, but they always cover.
Yeah.
I remember my dad used to come home, he was a police officer for 25 years, and he would just share all these awful stories, and my mom hated it. Or he would watch the news, and then that would be our meal conversation. And she's like, "Stop talking about all this bad stuff all the time."
Yeah.
And I know
Yeah.
one of the things I've seen people emphasize is positive self-talk and self-care. And one of the things was like when you get ready in the morning, like the night before, you write a sticky note and then you put it on your bathroom mirror. So when you get ready in the morning, it says like you're beautiful or today's going to be a great day and just starting off. And that's one of the big reasons I started my days off with prayer, and it was always a prayer of gratitude. I woke up, all
Yeah.
my whole body works, I can walk, I didn't die, it's
Right.
the world's not frozen over, so it's
Yeah.
good to start with a attitude of gratitude. And like you said, driving, I
Absolutely.
there was a lot of times I was commuting back and forth from base because I lived on base, but it was away from the work site. And I would always when I drove, I would always focus on the sunrise or the sunset or look at nature and be like, it's such a beautiful world. Not, man, I gotta go in the
Right.
submarine and I gotta work for 12 hours and I gotta see this guy I don't like at work, which is most of them. But,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's that
Yeah. And
choosing what you look at in life.
even in war, like I think about the other side that you're fighting, that these kids are going out there and fighting. And,
Yeah. Kids, that's what
even
it
the other
is.
side, these are someone's sons who are fighting, you know what I mean? And it's like, you can't hate the other side because they're doing what they are told to do. And
Yeah.
it's a real hard thing. And then you have a bunch of kids out there that just like have to do this. Yeah, I don't know. It's really
Right.
tough.
And
It's
my
really
buddy put
tough.
it best because I was hating on some Middle Eastern countries for stuff going on. And he was like, well, Mr. Whiskey, let me ask you this. Do you think the American government represents the people? Do you think they have your back and your opinion and your feelings in mind and what they're doing? And I was like, no, not really. And he was like, so what do you think about these other countries that aren't even democratic? We're supposed to be a democracy. We're the most
Right.
people represented in one. He goes, what do you think about these other countries that are dictatorships or whatever they are? How much less they're choosing to go to war or to do this and that.
Mhm.
And the
And
worst part is, like
also,
you
I
said,
mean,
it's kids. They're
that's
indoctrinated into
right.
it too.
Yeah. And the people who do these like terrible kamikaze things and stuff, they really think they're serving God.
Yeah,
Like that makes me curious on how God deals with that because they're
right.
in their hearts serving God.
Wow.
They're
And you
they're
know what?
you know
What? So I'm a huge Godzilla fan. Like it, right here to my left, I've got my whole wall of Godzilla figurines and posters. And when Godzilla Minus One came out, first off, one of the best Godzilla movies ever made. It actually follows the story of a Japanese kamikaze pilot during World War II who he fakes a maintenance issue with his plane to delay because he didn't want to do it. He goes, I don't want to blow up.
Right.
And it follows post World War II, the war ends, and he goes home. And it follows how everyone was like, we lost the war because you didn't want to do your mission. You didn't want to sacrifice. And it follows this guilt and this shame that he faced
Wow.
continually. And it was such an interesting movie because, and maybe there are other movies like that, but this was the first movie I ever saw where it followed, I mean, the amount of guilt and shame and the hatred, his neighbors who were loving neighbors hate him, our kids are dead because of
Yeah.
you. It was, his parents passed away and they're like, your parents are dead because you didn't want to do your job. And
Right.
it's
Yeah.
insane to think that, they're even people who grew up in that culture where they all were always raised to believe that's such an honor. I mean, at the end of the day, they're human beings. They want to preserve their life, and
Absolutely. Absolutely.
it's
But a lot of people
insane.
don't really think that deeply about it. They just, well, they're just the other side, so we just hate them. That's it.
Right.
It's a lot deeper than that. It's not that
It
black and
really
white.
is. Yeah. Now, Miss Shirley, so how did you end up, after all this trauma, get to where you are now, right? Because now you're helping other people. So at what point in your life did you have that turning point where you were like, I'm going to help other people now, and here's how I'm going to do it?
Well, I've always kind of I was kind of a bully to bullies when I was little because,
Oh yeah.
um, you know, and I had people find me on Facebook. It was like, thank you so much for what you did for me as a kid. And when we were little, and I was like, I barely even remember doing it, but I do remember a few incidents, and I would go after bullies because I'm like, I'm getting beaten to a pulp at home. Like,
Right at
what are you
home.
gonna do to me? I'm not scared of
Right.
you. Leave them alone. Like, where do you get off, hitting this person or, you know, bullying them around? I just always was that kind of person. And I think having deaf parents probably made me more aware of bullies and standing up because I always stood up for my parents all the time too. So helping people was always, and sometimes to a fault. I was always trying to, pull people out of their situations, and you can't do that unless they really want to change, right? So I had to learn that
Amen to that.
lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even my grandma would say, Shirley, you can't go down to them. They have to come up to you. When you go down to them, you're pulling them, but they don't want to come, and that is true. And a lot of us get caught into that. So I've kind of finally learned about boundaries and self-love and all that. Um, but when I got to this point to where I was able to write the book, people told me for years to write a book, for years. And I just, I'd sometimes try and, but it would just wouldn't happen. So I'm also a licensed massage therapist and Reiki master. So I was doing
Okay.
this. I had a client and she said, you know what, Shirley, you got to write a book. And it just clicked. I went home and it all poured out of me. But I feel like I had to be at a point where I felt safe enough to share my story, to know I wouldn't allow anyone to prey on me, to think I'm prey
Hmm.
because of the abuse and stuff that I've been through, because I was prey early on. I was that person, you know,
Right.
and I had to feel safe enough to know that I have my boundaries. I know who I am. I'm confident, and I also have my family. So my grandkids, when I had to go back there and rewrite, because I don't focus there. So to write the book was kind of tough because I don't like to live that. I don't like to think about it.
Right.
It's not my MO to dwell on that. So my grandkids kept me here when I had to go there because I have a blast with them and I have them 2 days a week. And I used to have them 3 days a week, but I just have so much fun with them, and we laugh and joke and play, and they keep me here when I had to go back there. So
Hmm. Okay.
I think now I kind of got on a broader spectrum of helping people. I have more time. My kids are adults, you know. I'm not raising two kids, you know, and I was a single parent since they were 2 and 4. So I worked a lot. I was, you know, always just
Right.
going. But so now is the time for me to do this on a broader spectrum. I feel safer doing it. I feel more confident doing it. I created this 90-day program that I'm very confident in that just it just shifts people's thinking. And once you're in that, after that 90 days, once you learn how to think this way and look at things and perceive things a different way, you don't want to go back. You don't want to feel the way you used to
Right.
feel,
Yeah, I get
you
what you're
know,
saying.
and but you got to experience the good before you know, decide I don't want to go back there, you know. And
Yeah.
so I guess, you know, it was a process, you know, to get where I'm at, but I was happy and confident and successful long before I decided to write a book, and because I learned how to use my mindset and have more faith, and the faith and mindset just goes hand in hand, and I just kept excelling with that and learning more and more and more. And I think I had to learn a lot, and I'm still learning. I'm not a master at
Right.
anything, you know. Um, I have a title of Reiki master, but I still feel like I'm still learning. I don't even like to say that really, but it is the title. But um, so I guess I'm just at a place where I think it's just time for me to do this, you know. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
transitioning into a whole new path. So
Okay. Yes, ma'am. And we having a link in the description below for your website. Is that the best way to contact you for all our listeners?
yes, yeah, shirleybuck.com. Yeah. My
All
book's
right.
on there. If someone wanted to schedule a free call, that's on there. My calendar's on there. Everything's on the website.
Okay. And your book is also on Amazon, correct?
Yes, it's on Amazon, and I just found out I was at a hotel because I was doing a book signing in Michigan, and the front desk was so, oh, what book are you here doing a book signing for? And I said, oh, Sweet Freedom Whispered in My Ear, and they looked it up and they said, oh, it's on Amazon, and it's at Target and Amazon, or Target and Walmart too. And I was like, really? I didn't even know that. I just found that out last weekend, but so but yeah, it is on Amazon. Sweet Freedom Whispered in My Ear is the title, and I hope it inspires a lot of people.
Yeah, and who should read it? I mean, who's the best person to pick up this book and read it?
Well, I think anyone who experienced trauma and abuse, because
Okay.
it not only do I tell my story, but at the end of each chapter I talk about what I gained from that, what I learned, and I also
Okay.
talk about mindset transformation. So it's not just a, you know, a story of trauma and abuse. It has a lot of good tips in it as well. But I mean, anyone who likes to read a story of someone overcoming, you know, a traumatic past, um, I hope I not kids read it, but I hope some teens maybe it falls in
Right.
their hands that, you know, are struggling and think that their life is doomed to, you know, terrible
Right.
things. And I hope that somehow this book gets into their hands. It's huge. I think if the younger you are, you know, I think it's best when to start young with this changing your mindset and thinking a
Right.
different way, because then it, you know, you absorb it quicker and it becomes a way of life, and
Becomes a
it
habit.
just will, you know, help you with your decision making and things like
Right.
that.
Okay. Well, Miss Shirley, before we wrap things up here, I'm just curious, do you have anything for the audience, any final message or anything you'd like to share?
Just you know, don't focus on the garbage, focus on the beauty, you
Yeah.
know, and believe, you know, because there's a lot more out there than we know. And, you know, self-love, please do the work for self-love, because you can't receive or give love properly without self-love. So I think those are a few things that
Yeah,
maybe I want people to take away.
for sure. I totally agree with that. And we've definitely talked on the show before about how I've been put in situations where, I was with a partner who didn't love themselves, and then they're kind of relying on me to love them for themselves and for me to love them for me, and kind of
And to
being
make
their
them happy.
self-confidence. Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure on somebody to
Yeah.
try to do
And
that.
yeah. And then the other situation I often found myself in was trying to help people who didn't want to help themselves, which you mentioned earlier on that you learned the hard way, and I've learned the hard way.
Yeah,
So
I sure did.
yeah. So really
But
one.
it's a learning process.
Right, right. And you can't help other people. But first, ladies and gentlemen, you got to help yourself.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Miss Shirley, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate having you as a guest.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Sailing through the ocean blue, nuclear reactors my crew, guiding the ship, the stars as our guide, through the waves we ride, jokes and laughter fill the air. On this voyage we have to share, working together, side by side, as one family we will abide. In the heart of the ship we reside, nuclear operators with pride, powering the vessel with every stride. Our mission, a source of great pride.